Hello. So today I'm going to be presenting my program in which I was working with for the past 6 weeks. So a little background on my client. He was a former student athlete participating in the sport of cross country and track and field. So he has been running for over 8 years, about over a little over 8 years, and the only main injury that he went through, he had a bunch of little missteps throughout his running career, but the main one was a stress fracture in his left femur, which I will go more in depth later on in this presentation. Okay, so for health and movement assessment, um, I chose to do not the full FMS pre-screen testing just because one, I didn't have the FMS kit with me, and two, I didn't have the necessary tools to make a makeshift FMS kit. So I just tried to pick off whatever functional movement tests I could do from the FMS test. And if you don't know what the definition of FMS is, according to McGee et al., it is a validated method of predicting injury risk and is composed of 7 different movement tests, each of which assesses a different functional body movement. And so, with that being said, I was presented with 2 red flags after putting my client through this pre-screening test. And one was again the stress fracture in his left femur. This was actually caused by overtraining. The client was running about 80 to 85 miles a week for about 3 months, and so he just didn't have any rest in between. His rest days would be literally a shorter run, and so with that, he just his muscles just really took a toll, and because it was always working every day, every single day without any really recovery, it just took a toll on his in his bones, and so his left femur uh, withstood a stress fracture at the end of his last season. And then another injury that he had before the stress fracture was a dislocation in his right wrist. This again was a running related injury. He was running and he tried to catch himself after tripping over some loose concrete. And not only did the bone pop out of the socket, there was a small hairline fracture in the tip on the tip of his ulna, and so with that, the doctor let him know that surgery is an option. He refused, and so he actually has early arthritis. And so in my later slide, there will be a comparison uh, to show the lack of mobility he has in his right wrist compared to his left wrist. And so for periodization, I apologize for not specifying this initially when I turned in my assignment before this. But so what I didn't realize was my first mesocycle goal was actually for hypertrophy rather than strength. And so when I finally looked back and realized this, first of all, hypertrophy, according to Newmeyer and Willoughby, is normally expressed as an increase in cross sectional area or gain in muscle protein mass as an adaptation to exercise training stress. And again, I didn't really realize this at first, but when I looked back at my program, I realized that hypertrophy is a really good foundation to build up upon, because one, it can lead to an increased amount of actin and myosin, which furthermore leads into increased strength and increased size of the muscle. And so with that being said, it's would be a I think it would be a really good foundation to really strong and sturdy base to build off of, because again it can lead into an increased amount of strength, which is my second mesocycle goal: lean muscle mass and strength. And the overall goal of the client was, as you can see, was lean muscle mass. And so that's why I added, for the recovery days, I added runs. just really short runs that would progress as the program went on. And so, with that being said, I have different levels of intensity, ranging from low, moderate to high. Again, I'm sorry I didn't really specify this first of all. But so for low, it is 30 to 40% rep max. For moderate, it is 60 to 70% rep max. And then for high, it is 90 to 100% rep max. And so we'll go to my actual program itself. And you can see that in the first 3 weeks, we start with low, which is again 30 to 40% rep max. And so, with that being said, I just for the goal for this was to have the client getting used to the movement so they can actually, know how to execute each exercise properly without injury and avoid injury later on in the program. And so that's why the reps are so high. I have it at 10 and the sets are at 5. And again, I wanted the main goal was to still get some sort of workout in, um, but also having, really light resistance so that again the client can get used to the movement and get used to everything, so they can gradually, because again the client hasn't been doing any lower body or any upper body exercise for quite some time. The recovery for the stress fracture was about 6 to 8 months, and during his college career, um, they never performed any upper body workouts. So I just wanted to ease the client into both upper body and lower body exercises with low intensity. And then once we get to the fourth week of my first mesocycle, we finally start to bump it up to moderate intensity, which is 60 to 70% rep max. I kept those sets the same just because, it wasn't too challenging to stay with, and that, but I did bring down the reps to 5 just because again we're at 60 to 70% rep max, and so there's more resistance in the exercise itself, and I wanted to, one, avoid injury, and two, still get a good workout in, and just really fatigue those muscles, to really reap the benefits from it. And so once the second mesocycle starts, we see that my sets drop down to 4 and my reps drop down to 3. And so we're slowly starting to get ready to, we're building up to the high intensity. And so with high intensity means low reps and sets, just because, again, I don't want to injure the client or anything like that. And so as you can see, we start to drop down in reps, and then finally, at the week 3 of my second mesocycle, we're finally in the high intensity range. And so the sets are at 3, reps are at 3. And during my last week is when we finally get to 3 sets of 2 reps. Because again, high intensity is, to me, 90 to 100% rep max. And so we're finally getting at the peak level of intensity that my client can endure. And so, okay, so going back to my presentation, going back, okay, next slide, exercise techniques. Um, what I found with my client was, again, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, we have the comparison of left and right wrist. And as you can see, there is a really significant difference during the extension, um, in the extension picture, of the right wrist compared to the left. And then for flexion, there's not too much of a difference, but there still is a slight difference. And so with that, he wasn't able to perform a front squat properly, or as as you're taught with the hand grip, usually your hands are right below the bar itself with your fingertips kind of cradling the bar. But because it was too uncomfortable for him, I had to modify it and still have the bar where it's supposed to be, but instead of having the hands underneath, we just had him cross it right over the top. And then for the depth in both front and back squats, he was a little hesitant to drop down to where you're supposed to be, where your both your quads and your hamstrings are parallel to the ground. Again, because he was a little hesitant with the left leg because of the injury, and so just with cues, I was really able to help him out and really bring him down to where he was supposed to be. And then if as you can see, I have a few videos in which showcases what I modified and what he needed to be corrected in for the squats. And you can watch it again on your own time, just because there is a time limit on this program. Okay, and then last slide, application and faith integration. What I've learned throughout this course is, one, the benefits of pre-screening a client. Again, with FMS, even though I wasn't able to really perform the full FMS, I was still able to really figure out what I needed to modify with this client, and really know what to avoid. Because again, I was able to see that he had an injury in his left femur beforehand, and his wrist, and so I was able to make the adjustments for my program. And again, it's just it's better to know beforehand, instead of putting a client into a program that can easily injure them. And so it's just better to have the history well before putting them into a program. And then I've also learned the importance of a well thought out program. And again, it was better to have the program, you know, set out, and so we would know which day or what to do each day, rather than kind of making it up as you go. So that you can see at the end of the program whether or not it was beneficial, what you can learn from it, and just overall, um, yeah, just know what you're doing, instead of um, just going by ear, playing it by ear. And so, what I do need to improve, though, is knowing how to align a program with the client slash practitioner goals. And as I mentioned before, I wasn't really, when I first turned in this assignment, I didn't really have the goals um, correctly. Uh, as my first mesocycle goal said, the goal was strength, which it wasn't, as I looked back on it, and so I really need to figure that out, that part of the program itself, um, beforehand, and know what I'm doing, because again, the client is looking at me as a professional, and so I should really know what I'm talking about. But again, it's just all with the experience. And so, lastly, the biblical references that in which I chose um, were all kind of within the same, um, you know, the same. What's the word I'm looking for? The same theme. For the first one, it's Hebrews 6:10. God is not unjust; He will not forget your work and the love you've shown Him, as you have helped His people and continue to help them. Um, and then I also chose Philippians 2:4, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And lastly, Proverbs 3:27, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to act. And so, all of these three references kind of have the same message, which is, if you have information, um, you know, within yourself, you should, and it can help others, why not provide it to others, instead of just holding it in yourself and really just being selfish with it. If you know you can help someone out, go out and do it. And so these three references pretty much have the same message, and so that is why I chose them. And so that is it for my program. Um, Hope you enjoyed my video, and yep. Thank you for this class.